Commissioner Ashworth, will you give tonight's invocation, please?
Certainly. You'll bow your heads. Our Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day and this opportunity to come and serve this city. We just pray that you would have us to do what you see is what we should do. We just ask for your blessings and your guidance, for it's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Before roll call, I would like to introduce our new city planner, Ms. Kendra Cobbs, who will be in attendance tonight with us. So if you haven't had a chance to meet her yet, please do so before leaving the meeting tonight. But Ms. Cobbs, we welcome you and look forward to working with you.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you all as well.
All right, roll call.
Commissioner Ashworth,
Here.
Commissioner Thorne, Commissioner Clark,
Here.
Commissioner Carter,
Here.
Commissioner Jordan,
Here.
Commissioner Hawkins,
Here.
Commissioner Skeen, Commissioner Brumlow.
Here.
Has everyone had a chance to look at last month's minutes? And if so, do I have a motion to approve and a second?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan,
Aye.
Commissioner Brumlow,
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Ashworth.
Aye.
Who do I call? BJ still? All right, we're going to call tonight's first application, which is a request for a final plat approval for the Timberlane subdivision located on the west side of Timberlane, north of West Robinson Street, west of US Highway 51, and east of Elm Street in Section 13, Township 3 South, Range 8 West, consisting of 5 lots of 2.05 acres, currently zoned in the R12 single-family residential district.
Well, as the chairman mentioned, this is a little 5-lot subdivision over on Timberlane. Basically, the property is zoned R12. All of the lots consist of more than 12,000 square feet, although Lot 1 is right at 12,001 square feet. All the lots meet or exceed that 12,000 square foot requirement. They also all meet the minimum width at the building line of 60 feet. All the lots are currently vacant, or they will ultimately be used for the construction of single-family detached residences. And all of the lots have direct access to Timberlane. Although Lot 1 also has access to Robinson Street, the topography would just not allow that to actually be used as an access point. As basically proposed, they all should meet the setbacks that I listed for you in your staff report. And the plat meets or exceeds all the development requirements of the R12 district. I did want to note in my staff report, obviously I carried this over from last month when we tabled the item. This would actually be heard at the November 16th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Aldermen, not the October 19th meeting. Of course, if you've had the opportunity to go by the property, you would have noticed that along Timberlane there's a fairly sizable ditch that runs through there. We have checked the FEMA flood maps, and basically the property does not lie within any kind of flood zone. So even though it's got this sizable ditch, it's not a flood-prone piece of property. At this point in time, we've not received any proposed restrictive covenants for this subdivision at this time. Therefore, we can't speak to what might be the proposed minimum house size or any kind of architectural details relative to this property. Based upon the I had noted in my staff report that based upon the small size of the subdivision, didn't really expect there to be any common elements. But since then, we have discovered that the developer is actually planning, rather than each lot, having a crossing of a creek to Timberlane, that basically the 4 lots that are kind of together would share 2 crossings, basically lots 2 and 3 would have a common crossing, and then 4 and 5 would have a common crossing, okay? While lot 1 would have its own unique driveway. The only question this raises, is, how maintenance of those crossings, will be handled between the property owners. So that's something that, will need to be worked out. Essentially, we're recommending approval of the subdivision. I have given you a motion of approval in your staff report. We need to revise the mortgagee certificate. We need to revise the plat to reflect the surveyor's certificate. We need to revise the plat drawing and the plat notes to reflect 10-foot wide utility easement on the rear property lines of the lots rather than 5 feet. We need to revise the plat to reflect the section corner tie-in. Then, of course, I've included conditions relating to submission of the restrictive covenants and some kind of information on the architectural proposal, size of houses, etc., for this development. Then from item number 4 on is our standard subdivision conditions. And with that, that's my report, unless anyone has any questions.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Page?
I don't guess there's anything that can be done about it now, but that lot 1 is pitiful. I mean, the way that it is arranged and situated, I mean, it's clear that it's done just to get that 12,000 feet.
Well, I had an opportunity before the meeting to speak with Robbie Jones, who's with us tonight. He's the engineer for the applicant, and he said that, the applicants originally tried to sell that remainder to the adjoining property there along Robinson Street, but they were not interested in buying it from him. So, it's kind of one of those deals where, what are you going to do? It's probably going to wind up being an undevelopable lot. But I think Mr. Jones can probably speak more to that.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Page? Thank you, Mr. Page. Will the applicant please come forward, stating your name and address?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Robbie Jones. I'm with Jones Davis and Associates, 8849 Center Street, South Haven, Mississippi. This is kind of an infield type development. People have looked over this thing for many years, but we're just trying to do the best we can, get 5 lots in there. You're absolutely right about that corner lot. I mean, it's going to take some creative designing to do anything on that lot.
So the plan right now, I don't guess is it's going to be sold to build on, or what's the plan for it?
Well, he's already, the owner's already tried to, I guess, I don't want to say pawn off, but sell it to the adjacent landowner there. But, he'll have to do something with it. I mean, it's still under his ownership. But, it could be buildable. I mean, you'd have to access it off of Timberlane, so.
Right now, the plan is just to have access between lots 2 and 3, and then 4 and 5 to
Yes,
Timberlane?
yeah, we're going to share an entrance there, and we're doing that because of the cost of crossing that creek.
And there's no plans right now on a crossing for lot 1 right now?
Yes, sir, it'd be a third culvert or box.
Okay, it'd have its own culvert or box?
Yes, sir.
Over Timberlane?
Mhm. But as far as the restricted covenants, the owner gave us any, he's gonna use what's already on the adjacent subdivisions out there. We've looked, well, I have, about the minimum heated, and, you know, I've seen everything from, just looking at the tax rolls, anywhere from 1,000 to 1,800 square feet. But there's one restricted covenant in the adjacent subdivision that has 1,250 as a minimum heated. So, and I'm sure these will have garages and, but it's, if you've seen that site, it's, you know, it's gonna take some, you know, there's a lot of trees there. We're gonna try to save as many of the trees as we can, you know, and set those lots, houses in them.
Is there a plan to have heated, plan to have restrictive covenants on it? I mean, that will eventually be something that's...
Oh, yes, sir, we'll have those. Like I said, we're gonna keep it just like the adjoining properties, you know.
And, I mean, I guess lot 1 bothers me as much as anything because it's right there, it's on the corner. I mean, it's a very visible location.
Well, yeah, you know, it's encumbered by, there's a big electrical box and it's a lot of trees right there on the top bank as you come through.
What about those graves in the back? I mean, are those gonna be accessible in any way?
I think you can access them through the other property coming that way. They just got off the property line.
So they're not within the property.
Yes, sir, on this lot they are, but the adjacent property to the west of it,
What if those people wanted to develop that property?
well, they'd have a little bit more problem than we would, because we only got 4 graves.
I mean, you know, some family member may come up and want to visit that grave.
Well, in the restricted covenants, or actually in the deed of that, we'll put access, you know, per family.
Maybe we need to have restrictive covenants before us too, something to look at right now to be able to do this. I mean, this seems premature to me, especially with that lot 1 right now, the way it sits, not knowing what we can put on there.
Well, that's, I mean, yeah. It's just a
I mean, if we're
difficult.
planning on building on it, I mean, it sounds like they're planning on putting something on it. I mean, the way that it's laid out, I mean, to be a 12,000 square foot minimum and then squeezing the way that back triangle is right there.
Mhm. Well, that triangle is just, you know, it's just kind of, it was there to get the square footage for the lots, you know, you just have, it's just a remnant. But, you know, there's still, I mean, it'd be expensive, it'd be, and it takes some doing, but you could get a building in there. I mean, it may take retaining walls and 2-story type deal, but, you know, there's room there for it.
That's what I'm afraid of, what we're gonna be looking at if we don't have a better idea right now. That's what scares me about it.
Well, yeah, but you could always put a condition on it that when that lot develops, that it come back before this commission.
Is that something we can do, BJ?
Well, personally, I think it might be better, like, you know, obviously you can put any kind of condition just about, you know, on an approval, as long as it's considered to be reasonable. The only thing about it, of course, is that usually places the responsibility of keeping up with it on the staff, you know. But at the same time, you know, I would tend to also want to include something in the covenants on the property, you know, requiring that.
You mean we can approve it contingent upon any development on lot 1 coming back before the planning commission, as well as contingent on approval of the restrictive covenants before any development?
Yeah, I mean, the way the current motion is structured, they have to submit restrictive covenants to the staff for approval before the plat is recorded. Okay? You could require as part of that condition that they include a covenant, stating that any development of Lot 1 must be approved by the Plan Commission before issuance of a building permit.
Okay.
It would be all right, though.
That'd be all right with y'all?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
BJ, would this also be where we would include that they have some sort of easement to those grave sites? Or is that going to be in the per lot design of the subdivision? Is this where we would add that now?
You could add that, it wouldn't necessarily have to be a condition related to the covenants, but you could make that a condition of the approval.
Would that just be essentially a number 12, I guess? Okay, that's what I was thinking too.
I would certainly suggest that, the grave site, I hesitate to use the word cemetery, but the grave sites, there should be an area delineated on the plat, reflecting their location.
And there is, I think in the
Yeah, we
layout,
show 'em on the.
yeah, that was submitted, there is something showing where the graves are.
Right here on the last one. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Jones? Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here for or against this application?
Okay, I'll put that too.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to grant final plat approval for the Timberlane subdivision located on the west side of Timberlane, north of West Robinson Street, west of US Highway 51, and east of Elm Street, in Section 13, Township 3 South, Range 8 West, 5 lots, 2.05 acres, currently zoned in the R12 Single Family Residential District, medium density, based upon a finding that the submitted plat generally conforms to the requirements of the city's codes and ordinances subject to the following conditions. Number 1, as worded. Number 2, the restrictive covenants shall be submitted to the planning staff for review and approval prior to recording the plat, and the planning commission shall provide approval before any construction or development of Lot 1 occurs. Number 3, as worded. 4, as worded. 5, as worded. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, as worded. And including number 12, that a condition of approval is inclusion of an easement allowing access to the existing graves on Lot 4, and that the existing graves shall be notated on the final plat to identify location.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan,
Aye.
Commissioner Brumbelow,
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Ashworth.
Aye.
Motion for approval carries.
I got mine on yours. Oh, here, I'll give her mine. I don't know. I didn't read it word for word.
It'll come up next Tuesday night. Board all.
All right, item number 2, a request for a design review variance to restrict on-site paving to access drive and parking at the front of a property, with the balance of the access drive being crushed concrete and no parking being provided at the batch house as identified on the submitted site plan for Delta Industries, located at 3262 Industrial Drive, a 10-acre tract on the east side of Industrial Drive, south of Vaden Drive, west of McCracken Road, and east of Mount Pleasant Road extended in Section 19, Township 3 South, Range 7 West, currently zoned M2 Heavy Industrial.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Just to give a little background information on this design review variance request, and this is information that isn't included in the staff report. So this is a site that consists of a paved entrance and exit driveway extending from Industrial Drive. And we do have some pictures of the project site. This is a picture viewing the project or the development from Industrial Drive. And once you enter the site, the paved portion of the driveway continues to the front of the shop building, and that is what we're viewing right here. I can get my pointer to work. So from Industrial Drive, what you immediately view is the shop building, and there included with that are 2 rows of parking that are in front of the shop building. So this is a view of the 2 driveways from Industrial Drive. This would be the first driveway entry from that's shown here on the left, and then the next entrance is to the right here, the picture to the right. And to the northwest of the shop building, there's also a single row of parking, which viewing the image on the left, you would drive through down this driving aisle, and then you have the other parking that's situated to the northwest of the shop building. And if you hang a quick right at the dumpster, you would be situated at the picture to the right, which would bring you the end of the pavement from the access drive and entering the rest of the site, which would consist of the crushed concrete. And then also included in the background information is that there's a batch house, which is at the rear of the shop, and it's at the rear of the project site. And this is the batch house. So there are 2 structures, the front being the shop building, and at the rear of the property is the batch house building. And there's no parking provided at the batch house building. Our zoning ordinance does require industrial uses to have a minimum of 1.3 parking spaces per every employee, and the batch house, as stated in the application, would have up to 2 employees. This is also just an overall view of the site from the end of the pavement, just looking towards the rest of the site. Part of our design review standards, we do have the minimum standards of design, which are in the parking and traffic circulation section. And it does state that all areas used for access, maneuvering, standing, parking, or display of motorized vehicles, trailers, boats, recreational vehicles, or manufactured or mobile homes, whether for customer or business purposes, shall be hard surfaced or of either Portland cement or asphaltic concrete. And there is another section. Within that same section, it's also stated that the number of required parking spaces shall be in conformance with the requirements of our zoning ordinance. And further in the staff report, we also have the 4 findings of fact that would be consistent for granting the design review variance, whether it's for approval or denial. And lastly, I'd like to point out that part of the application, or I'm sorry, not the application, but staff did issue a certificate of development for the project in November of 2020. And within that certificate of development, it was issued with the conditions that all parking lot and driveway surfaces would be paved with either asphalt or concrete, and also all parking and directional striping would be marked. And other than the motions that I've already mentioned that are a part of the staff report, that concludes my report. We also do have the applicant here in case there are additional questions about the site or the project in general, and that concludes my report.
Any questions or comments for Ms. Cobbs? Thank you, Ms. Cobbs.
Thank you.
Will the applicant please come forward stating your name and address?
Thomas Anderson, 3262 Industrial Drive.
Would you like to give us some feedback from your end?
Yeah, so we submitted the plan back in November and it was approved. And the statements you made about the parking being paved, we did agree to that. It was our understanding that we could leave the parking at the front of the plant. So we generally don't want our batch operators parking back there. That's where our concrete trucks come through. We have that front end loader, you saw it, he's moving all day. We generally like to separate our traffic, our pedestrian traffic, from that traffic. So we usually have offset parking, just like we have here. If you saw the black vehicle that was parked there, can you go back? I'll use your slides because you brought them, so. Well, he's behind the dumpster there, but you can see him straight away. That's our batch plant. That's where he parks. In the morning, he's the first guy who gets there. He parks, walks to the batch house, and operates the plant. So, I mean, that's pretty much where we're at with the parking. Our understanding is we put the extra parking up there to meet the standards. We just didn't put it at the back of the batch house.
Just my understanding, you did more parking originally than what you were supposed to do for this same standard?
Correct. So if you look over there, I think that, I want to say there's 12 spots over there. All 12 of those are assigned to the batch house for future development, because we have truck drivers and those kind of things. Right now, we don't have that many people stationed there. We're actually bringing trucks in. But in the future, we'd like to have that many there. So all of the parking is right there at that spot. And then they'll move to their trucks and deliver concrete.
And it's a safety issue for them to be parked at the batch house.
Well, yes. So it's a safety and an insurance issue, because we have had issues with vehicles getting hit by the loader and those kinds of things just in the general day-to-day work of operating the facility. So separating it is our goal. Ideally, we'd like to be able to separate it completely where you never had anybody, you could pick them up and move them over there, but that's just not practical.
I noticed that in the staff comments, there was a mention about this being an issue for the fire lane. That the batch house was located 400 feet from Industrial Drive. Such a distance is clearly prohibitive for the fire lane requirement. And I think think, as I understand it, there may be a concern about if there is a fire, about fire trucks or equipment being able to get to it.
We've got no, Matt Massey's, I haven't gotten any comments about that from the fire department.
Well, no, it's just in the.
On this? For this issue? Not this issue.
In our design standards ordinance, there is the section on fire lanes and the distance that would be required. Within the design standards ordinance, the distance that would be required for fire lane access from the public road.
I still don't understand the question. Is that related to the
I don't
parking?
know that I understand, I just understand that it's not in conformity. That's what I'm understanding, because, I mean, it could be a fire issue, a fire hazard is what I was concerned about.
Well, I think the issue here, I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, so to speak, but the thing to understand about the design standards ordinance, we've talked a lot about parking, okay, and that is a big part of it. But if you look at your staff report, that first reference relating to parking and traffic circulation, it says all parking and loading areas, shall, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong staff report. Hang on a second.
It's,
I got a lot of business on here, you probably.
It's the
might be
first,
next one.
it's the first, the first statement I mentioned on the first page, the all areas used for access, maneuvering, standing, parking, or display of motorized vehicles.
Trailers, boats, recreational vehicles, et cetera.
Yeah.
Whether for customer or business uses, shall be hard surface divided with Portland cement or asphalted concrete. In other words, basically anywhere you park or drive a motorized vehicle has to be paved. Now, yes, we're focusing to a certain extent on, his employee parking there in the front, but where do the concrete trucks drive and where do the concrete trucks park if they park at night? Where does the front loader drive and where does it park? Basically what this requirement requires is that anywhere you can drive any kind of motorized vehicle or park any kind of motorized vehicle has to be paved, okay? And I think what Kendra is getting at, is that we do have some requirements, concerning fire lanes in the ordinance that also come into play. But I think the most important thing to understand here is, we're not just talking about parking.
So, my perspective on this, our understanding is we submitted a design plan that clearly delineated where we were paving and where we were putting crushed concrete. It was clearly delineated, and it's been built to that design. We got these comments, and it was our understanding that we got that comment that was specifically related to parking, and again, it was our perspective that we met that requirement because we put the parking, it's concrete, we met the striping and the standards for that, and that because the design was approved, it was our understanding that it was okay to use the crushed concrete where we used it.
I think part of that is it wasn't really approved. It was just an issue of a certificate of development to allow you to start that because on November 10th, that certificate of development was issued under those conditions that all parking and driveway surfaces would be either paved or asphalt. So that was included in that when they issued that certificate of development.
So it may have been a misunderstanding on our side because, again, we took that to say that the parking had to be paved, which it is.
Correct. But now
We
we've
did
got
not
the
take
rest.
that as that the whole loop had to be paved.
But now we're in that situation. So-
Right, and that's why I'm here, and that's what we want to discuss. And for the fire issue, so the crushed concrete, the fire trucks can go, our concrete trucks can go around. The fire department, I don't know that Matt ever brought a fire truck out there, but we drove, he witnessed us drive a loaded concrete truck around so that he could get around all the buildings. And my understanding was he was satisfied that his trucks could drive around anywhere they needed to get to.
What we're looking at here is a design review variance, and my understanding is that the this exception, what you're proposing has to be equal or better than what the design requirements are for the city of Hernando, which is concrete or asphalt. I mean, I don't see how crushed concrete is equal or better than.
Well, so as it looks right now, you can look at it, see the wet, how it looks like that?
I do.
So in a year, it is as hard, if not harder, than concrete. The reason we use it because it holds up better. And it's from just a usage standpoint, it is a product that we have that is a waste product. We can recycle it and use it, and we do. And so I will concede that point. But after a year of use, it is as good or better than concrete from a structural standpoint. But it takes time for it to set up. So you do get a little bit of this in the beginning.
Will concrete not bust up anyways with those heavy trucks on it?
Well, so any building material you use under enough abuse will bust up. But if our concrete's good, has been installed correctly, it should last a reasonable amount of time. Can I tell you how long it'll last? It depends on how many trucks we run and how often we do it. Eventually, it will degrade. Yes, it's not going to last forever with the concrete trucks going over. There is no product that you could get. I mean, we could put steel beams out there, and this is going to, railroad tracks, they degrade over time with enough usage. So yes.
I think to a certain extent, it also gets back to the design. You know, if you put in, say a limestone base with just 3 inches of asphalt on top of it, it probably would break up fairly quickly under the weight of the concrete trucks. On the other hand, you can design a road that will support that weight. It's just a matter of your design.
Mr. Page, what about handicap accessibilities to and around that building?
Well, we have posed that question to our august city attorney. It's essentially a situation where the ADA requirements are part of the city's building code. So in the sense of the Planning Commission's action, it's not strictly relevant. And the reason that I say that is because the Planning Commission does not have authority to grant variances of the building code. It's not part of your purview, okay? So regardless of whether you approve the variance or not, it would have no impact, if the ADA requirements are deemed to come into play. The only difference would be that it would not necessarily require them to pave everything that you're denying the variance would require them to pave. It may be simply making some kind of connection between the shop building and the batch house, and possibly including a handicap parking space. The real question is, since we've talked with Delta Industries, the question has been raised, well, it's not open to the public, and only to employees. How does that come into play? That's, in my opinion, strictly a legal question that Ms. Pittman's going to have to answer for us.
Yeah, so I didn't know that was going to be a question until tonight, so we'll be happy to get an answer for that. But as I understand it, and talking with BJ and Kendra, you guys can't go around the ADA guidelines. They have to be met. And so the biggest question in my mind as it stands right now is whether or not there would need to be sufficient parking and access to the batch house, because the parking is kind of adjacent. I mean, it's not adjacent, it's kind of far away from there.
Right, so again, so our stance and our interpretation of the ADA at every site that we have is our batch house is not ADA, it is not required to meet ADA requirements. So we don't employ any personnel currently who require ADA accessibility, and the requirements of the job of the personnel who are stationed at that facility have to meet certain requirements to perform that job, which prohibit them from being able to be ADA accessible. So we don't have a single batch house at any facility anywhere that is ADA compliant, because it doesn't, well, they are all ADA compliant because we're not required to meet ADA responsibilities, and that's our stance on it.
Right, so as I understand your stance, is it Mr. Anderson?
Yes, sir.
You don't hire individuals who have disabilities to work in the batch house.
Well, so we don't discriminate against individuals with disabilities. However, there are certain performance requirements that prohibit people with certain disabilities from being employed in that specific position.
Right,
But that's the gist of it, which is allowed by the ADA. It's reasonable accommodations, and the batch manager, he has to climb up on the top of the silos. He's got to go up to the second story of the building, which is not ADA accessible anyway. So there's certain requirements that again preclude us from having to meet that requirement. So.
And you have that opinion based on what? I'm just asking.
That's Delta's stance.
That's your stance on it? Is it based on legal consultation with anyone, or
yes,
just in your own review of?
Yeah, it's Delta's stance with our legal team has advised us that that's our stance.
Okay.
And this is not the first time it's come up.
Gotcha. First time it's come up for me. So if you know, and I think as BJ is saying, that's a different issue. Other than, I mean, whether or not they're required to have that is going to be beyond totally your control. But I'd be happy to give you a call this week and talk with you about that.
Absolutely.
And find out whether or not it's going to fall within our guidelines, because our guidelines are subject to the ADA guidelines as a city. So that's something we can look at. But I don't have an answer other than his answer and my observations right now to give to you.
I mean, obviously, if it was required, I mean, and I understand your position, but also understand our learned city attorney's position that we just don't know right now. So, I mean, if it's going to be required, if you're wrong, and it's required to be ADA accessible at the batch house, I mean, you're going to be required to put in the concrete, or at least concrete or asphalt, some around the batch house. I don't see how you can get around.
Oh, yeah, I understand what you're saying. We're not incorrect in this. I'm not being boastful or anything about that, but I mean, it's just the way it is.
And I guess for y'all, the question is whether or not answering the other question would solve the question you're talking about right now, whether or not Chapter 7 requires more than what he's doing right now.
And that's kind of what I'm saying.
Right. Aside from the ADA,
So I'm going to be around. I'm coming back next month for the shop for other issues. So I'm open to doing whatever you guys want to do. If we want to table the whole thing until we come back to this, I would like to be able to go back. There was some kind of, I don't know, thought process from you on whether or not we were going to be successful in leaving it as the crushed concrete around, or if you guys were going to be going down the road of forcing us to do more than what we've done at this point. And again, I don't have to hold you to a thing, but we can table the whole thing and come back after we've discussed and you're ready to.
yeah, I think I can see you either way. And obviously, you can look at this isolated issue and leave out the ADAs, the parking lot issues for that, deal with this, or however you want to handle it.
I don't like to use the word force because it was written into your certificate of development that, again, those conditions would include that. So forcing you is kind of a harsh word to say, but, and I know that in the same conditions, different outfits or businesses that we've had these same things come in because of an economic standpoint and with the crushed concrete that we also denied because it's just not within our requirements. So I'm still holding the fact that, that certificate of development was issued on November 10th, including that verbiage that this was to be included in those areas. Loading, and spelled out very clearly, parking and loading, as well as striping those parking spaces, so I feel like that came right after parking, so it had to be seen at some point of that and not just understood as just parking when you were issued that certificate of development. And that's kind of where I'm looking at. And then that will keep it as an equal or, it's definitely a better standard than the crushed concrete. We all know that. So I just wanted to put that out there. That certificate of development was issued under those conditions that it would all be asphalt or concreted. So anyone else have any comments or questions?
How many other facilities do you have?
Operating, we have 32 operating. We own 70 something.
Okay. And none of them are concreted around the batch house?
We have a couple of sites where everything is concreted. Those were acquisitions. We do not build sites with everything being concreted because, to be honest, the aggregates that we use, if the whole thing is concrete, it's a huge issue for us. We actually prefer for most of it to not be concrete because we spill around the site. We call it aggregate creep. As we dump rocks and sand, some gets out of the truck, and after 10 years of operating, some sites are 2 or 3 feet higher than they used to be. So even if you concrete it, it's very difficult to keep it concrete, especially around the plant and where they're going to wash out and everything. So what we end up having to do, we just don't build them that way anymore. We do have some that we purchased that way, and they are more difficult to operate than other sites.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Anderson? We'll let you sit down for a little while, huh?
Sit down?
Unless you have anything else to add.
Oh, no, okay.
All right. Is there anyone here for or against this application? If not, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny design review variance to restrict on-site paving to only the access driveway and parking at the front of the property, with the balance of the access driveway being crushed concrete and no parking being provided at the batch house building for the Delta Industry site located at 3263 Industrial Drive, parcel number 3074, 1907.0000001.00, a 10-acre parcel located on the east side of Industrial Drive, south of Vaden Drive, west of McCracken Road, and east of Mount Pleasant Road extended in Section 19, Township 3 South, Range 7 West, for Thomas Anderson, representing Delta Industries, the owner of the property, as reflected on the plans submitted in their application, based upon the findings set forth in A, B, C, and D.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Clark,
Nay.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yay.
Commissioner Brumbelow,
Yay.
Commissioner Hawkins,
Nay.
Commissioner Ashworth?
Aye.
So the motion to deny carries. The ayes have it. All right. Item number 3, a request for a design review variance to waive the requirements for curb and gutter improvements along the on-site access drive and parking area identified on the submitted site plan for Delta Industries located at 3262 Industrial Drive.
Okay. Similar to the last application, Article 7, Section D, Item 13, states that all parking and loading areas shall be provided with a permanent Portland cement curb. In addition, all landscaped areas that can be encroached upon by a motor vehicle shall be protected by a wheel stop constructed of Portland cement appropriately anchored to the pavement and set a minimum of 2 feet back from the curb to restrict the destruction of landscape materials by vehicles. Essentially, the variance is requesting to not be required to install the curbing or the wheel stops, where the ordinance would require that to be the case. You have the 4 criteria that you are to consider in approving or denying the application. You have the applicant's response, you have our staff comments relative to the issue. Basically curbing and or wheel stops provide various benefits, both constructive and aesthetic. Curbing and or wheel stops provide protection for required landscaping that may be damaged by vehicles that may run off the paved area of the site. Essentially, if you look at the photograph on the screen there, you can see that one of the requirements of the design review ordinance is where you have parking spaces that face the street. You have to have what's called an opaque barrier that can be shrubbery. All right? And looking at the picture on the left, those parking spaces do face Industrial Drive, and that's why you have the landscaping that runs, along the front of those parking spaces. Obviously, if you don't have anything to stop the vehicle, it's too easy for the overhang. They may not actually run off the paved parking area, but you have a 2-foot overhang on the front of your car that will be constantly hitting up against that landscaping and ultimately damaging it and possibly killing it. Okay. Additionally, curbing or wheel stops can also prevent vehicles from running off the paved area of the site and creating holes or ruts in the yard areas along the edges of the paved portions of the site. Curbing and wheel stops can also be used to direct drainage to establish drainage ways, as opposed to allowing drainage from the site to sheet drain onto adjacent properties. So there are some basic reasons for curbing to be required. Basically, I've provided you with a motion to approve the design review variance with appropriate findings, as well as a motion to deny with appropriate findings. Of course, if you feel that you need additional time to consider the item, or you need additional information to address the questions, then you can certainly table the item until those things are met. So, with that, that's my report, unless anyone has any questions.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Page? If not, will the applicant please come forward again? State name and address. We got you, though.
Thomas Anderson, 3262 Industrial Drive. So, try not to be a broken record here. So, again, it was our understanding that the plans were submitted without the curb and gutter for the interior driving, so it was built to those plans. And that's kind of where we're at here. It's M2, this is industrial. I don't feel that it really takes away from the total aesthetic value from the front. That's me, I understand. I'm different than some people. That's really where I'm at with this one here. So we're requesting just relief from this.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Anderson?
I will add that it doesn't take away from the M2, if you drive through the industrial area, I mean, the road coming up to here doesn't have curb and gutter. The road that we put in does, but if you come down McCracken and Baden, they don't have curb and gutter. Most of the industrial facilities over there don't have curb and gutter, so again, that's why it doesn't really take away it not being on the interior of our site.
Any questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Is there anyone here for or against this application? Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve a design review variance to waive the curbing and/or wheel stop requirements around all access drives and parking and loading areas internal to the Delta Industry site located at 3263 Industrial Drive, parcel number 3074.190.0-00001.00, a 10.0 acre parcel located on the east side of Industrial Drive, south of Baden Drive, west of McCracken, east of Mount Pleasant Road, extended in Section 19, Township 3 South, Range 7 West, for Thomas Anderson, representing Delta Industries, the owner of the property, as reflected on the plans submitted in their application, based upon the following findings: A, B, C, D, A, B, C, and D.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan,
Aye.
Commissioner Brumbelow,
Yay.
Commissioner Hawkins, Commissioner Ashworth.
Nay.
The motion to approve carries. The ayes have it. All right, item number 4, request for a design review variance to waive the requirement for screening around the mechanical units located at the batch house as identified on the submitted site plan for Delta Industries located at 3262 Industrial Drive.
Okay. Get my voice back here, starting to get a little gravelly. Basically, the ordinance requires that mechanical, communications, and service equipment, including satellite dishes and vent pipes, being totally screened from public view by parapets or walls. Essentially, that's the request. You should not be required to do that for the mechanical units at the batch house. So I would note that the batch house does sit, although you can, obviously plainly see the mechanical units, and that is a side of the building that basically faces towards Industrial Drive. That is 400 feet from Industrial Drive. If you look in your staff report, I've included a couple of photographs that we have one. I think it might be the very, not the last one, it might be the very first. if you look at the very first photograph in your staff report, it's this picture, do you think? Okay, yeah. Okay, the one on the left is the same picture that we have in your staff report. And that kind of gives you an idea. This is actually where the driveway comes off of Industrial Drive. And you can see the batch house kind of in the distance. So that gives you a kind of a better idea of the visibility from the public road. Okay? Again, I have given you the 4 criteria along with the applicant's responses to the 4 criteria and staff comments. I have also given you a proposed motion to approve with appropriate findings, as well as a motion to deny with appropriate findings. And of course, you always have the option of tabling if you feel you need additional time or additional information. So with that, that's my report, unless anyone has any questions.
Questions or comments for Mr. Page? Thank you, Mr. Page. Mr. Anderson, once again.
Thomas Anderson, 3262 Industrial Drive. Again, the broken record, but I will also add that the thing that catches your eye on any concrete plant is the silo in the background. Regardless of what we've done anywhere, that's what you're going to see looking at this. And as BJ said, it's 400-something feet off back there. And I will add that the equipment is painted relatively close to the building color. I did talk to a couple of people about painting it the exact same color. The electrical boxes, I could do that if that was, and I'd be happy to do that. The AC units, the split units, it said it voided my warranty if I did paint them. So that's the color that they'll have to be. So again, I'm just asking for some relief for this one due to the M2 circumstances. And I will also add that in the industrial area, most of them are visible to some extent. Again, and at most sites, you know, it's the industrial aspect that draws your eye, not the mechanical units on the buildings.
Would anything even grow right there?
No, we couldn't get any. So, to be honest, I've actually already placed an order to replace all the trees in the front because they will likely not survive. So we've already, for that aspect, we know they probably won't. We have a hard time, especially given the time of year that they had to go in. But we get a lot of dusting just because of the nature of our business. But yeah, back there, likely we probably couldn't get anything to grow. We'd be into having to put a large wall in to screen it. BJ and I have talked about what we would have to do, and it's pretty substantial. And it would have to be a little bit off too. You can't see it here. If you look at you look at the plans, right there where it is, that's where our grinder pump is for there, so we'd actually have to have it offset significantly to put it up there as well. Could we do it? Absolutely. Anything's accomplishable, but again, we just, like I said, concrete plant, you draw your eye to the silo, that's what you look at.
And for the most part, 3 of your sides are natural buffers with the tree lines and stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
that's on your property.
I haven't even mentioned that there's nothing. We're down the end of this road. They're going to expand next to the guy next to us is going to be worse than we are if he puts in what he's going to put in. So I'm not really that concerned about that. But yeah, I mean we're pretty buffered. We're secluded all the way back there. I will say we did use a local AE firm, and I had conversation with them supposedly knowing the ordinances and everything. It could have been in the design, oriented differently, so that stuff this wouldn't have been a problem, but this is where we are. Any other questions?
Any questions or comments for Mr. Anderson? Thanks, sir. Is there anyone here for or against this application? And do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve a design review variance to waive the requirements to screen ground-mounted mechanical units at the batch house on the Delta Industries site at 3262 Industrial Drive, parcel number 3074-1907.00001.00, a 10-acre parcel located on the east side of Industrial Drive, south of Vaden Drive, west of McCracken Road, and east of Mount Pleasant Road, extended in Section 19, Township 3 South, Range 7 West, for Thomas Anderson, representing Delta Industries, the owner of the property, as reflected on the plans submitted in their application, based upon the findings set forth in A, B, C, D, and D.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan?
Aye.
Commissioner Brumbalet?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins? Commissioner Ashworth?
Aye.
Motion to approve carries. Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Before you run off, one of the things I thought I should mention before Mr. Anderson leaves is the fact that anyone who is aggrieved by any decision of the Planning Commission can appeal it to the Board of Aldermen by submitting their request in writing to the Planning Commission office within 10 days of today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas.
I'll see you next month.
All right.
You got more on this one?
They did.
All right. All right, Mr. Page and Ms. Cobbs, the review of the updated comprehensive plan document, are we still on the table with that one?
I have reached the conclusion that Kristen is going to have to be the one to call Mr. Walker, because he never answers my call. He always answers her calls, but he don't answer my call. So I guess he must like to talk to her. 'Cause I don't want to talk
I
to
get
her.
his checks cut.
Okay, so you see, that's what. But one of the things I have been thinking about, we're still trying to set up this idea of the Zoom meeting, so that you don't have to drive here from Franklin. I'm thinking that we probably should be considering a special meeting. The reason that I say that is because obviously he'll make a presentation, and then we'll have our discussion, as part of that. And I don't know that you would necessarily want to do that, like if we were doing it tonight, if you want to do that now. That would make for a relatively long meeting. Whereas I think it would maybe suit everybody a little bit better, if we just had a dedicated meeting for that purpose. Having said that, obviously I don't expect everybody here to be prepared tonight, to tell me, prospective dates, and obviously, with Thanksgiving and then Christmas coming up, we have to be very selective and when we might be able to do it. But I just wanted to let you know my thinking and see if everybody kind of agrees with my thinking on this.
Would we have to call a special meeting if we broke it into maybe a couple of shorter segments where we discuss it and then put together an actual, I don't know if we say questionnaire or whatever, at a special meeting to present to, do we have to be, and Steve, this might be a question for you, can we meet off chart to discuss some of the things we might all be seeing in shorter segments where we can have a meeting to address that list of things we've come up with?
Well, I could tell you, not meaning to steal our, I guess, the city attorney's thunder here, but obviously, any time the quorum of the planning commission gets together, it has to be a public meeting.
Okay.
Okay? It doesn't have to be a public hearing, You know, in other words, we don't have to let people that may want to attend speak, but it does have to be a public meeting. Now, of course, I think we've talked in the past, you know, when we reach the point where we want to make a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen, we do have to have one advertised public hearing before we make that recommendation. But I think in terms of having, you know, when we do it in segments like you're talking about, at the end of, say, a regular meeting, and then maybe having a special meeting to bring it all together, you know, we can certainly do that, but it would have to be a public meeting, you know, people would have to know that we were doing it. But anyway, I expect that it would probably be a public meeting not like this. Because it's not something we would have to advertise. I mean, you know, state law only requires us to, you know, post it prominently here at City Hall. But anyway, my question is, you know, if we want to approach this in segments, that's something that we could obviously do ourselves, you know, and then bring in Mr. Walker for the big meeting. You know, I'm not sure if he would necessarily be interested in, you know, even zooming, you know, for every one of the segments.
And that's where I was going with it, where we could kind of compile a larger presentation to him to answer for us instead of, oh, we forgot to ask that or do this or suggest that. We could have that built for him already before we present it in a bigger form, so.
Well, I tell you what, let's let Kendra and Kristen and I get together and we'll see what we can put together as a kind of outline or schedule. And we'll try and put that together.
But Ms. Cobbs, have you had a good chance to look through it and get acquainted with it? I mean, it's going to be something you're going to be.
I have looked at it, but I still need to dig into it the way I'd like.
Sure.
So I hadn't really gotten to that point yet.
So
The thing about the public meetings law is that if you have a quorum, anytime you have more than four of you, it's got to be a public meeting. It's got to be a minute statement and, you know, valid public meetings often don't. So you could email each other and blind copy the email, so you're not actually, you're not all seeing what everyone else is saying and discuss it that way.
What if, Steve, if we had like meetings with, say, 3 people,
That's fine.
could we do that?
Yep.
That's what I was gonna ask, if we could maybe split up a couple peer groups or something, you know, where we have 3 meet here, 3 meet there.
Is it an 8-member panel?
Yes,
Yes.
it's 8 members, but the chairman does not vote. He's
I
a
know
voting
votes.
member. So it's actually 7.
All right,
So
yeah.
quorum would
So
be
you do
4.
3.
But the chairman counts in the quorum though,
Oh, it does?
I do.
Okay,
because he can vote to break the tie.
Tie.
okay.
Right.
So it's a 4, anytime 4 or more get together.
So we could do
3.
3 peer groups, you know.
Yeah, you can break it up and do it that way, and then come.
Somebody can be a, well, nobody's going to do it twice.
Being over.
Great
Come on.
You
ideas.
could just be a median by yourself, Robert, and then you got 2, 3 and 3, and then they can consult with you.
No.
That way.
Oh, we're still missing one.
Yeah, we have 8, there's 8 people.
We got Kevin and
Yeah,
Shay that's,
that's right. Gotcha.
We'll work it out.
yeah.
It's just a math problem.
I think if we did it that way, just to compile some questions, one, and y'all didn't hear me say it, save the city some money from having a special meeting too many times, although we could all use the Christmas cash. But that would, you know, alleviate some of that, and we could compile enough suggestions / questions to present that special meeting where we could host it with him via Zoom or.
Okay.
And
Or you could assign, you could appoint committees of 3, 3, and 2 right now.
I mean, should we appoint, and I'm just spitballing here, but I know there were different things
Look at different
to look
sections of
at.
that.
I mean, that
comprehensive
one
plan.
group is supposed to focus on a section, and then maybe at the next meeting, next month, we talk about what we, I don't know. I mean, I'm just-
That group,
That's
yeah.
the way to do it.
Yeah. I think we're gonna knock it out more efficiently than everybody trying to, well, we looked at the same thing, and it's gonna give us different perspectives of this plan to present, where we might, it'd be a healthier outlook on it,
So
so.
give each group a certain section to review.
Break it down into 3
I
sections.
don't know what sections we're gonna call.
BJ, why don't we do this? Why don't I get with you and Ms. Cobbs in the next week or so? We kind of see how we can section this out one. And then I can say, okay, Keith, Shay, and Russell on one, you got this section. Y'all can meet, figure out your questions and comments there.
The only thing I would say that, you know, I think what you're talking about is a good idea, but I also think that every group should at least have the future land use plan as part of their review, because that's really gonna be the important part of this thing. You know, is what the future land use map shows and how people feel about what's being reflected for future development of the city.
It's not part of this, though,
I think everybody's gonna wanna have input in that question.
right? But is that a part of this, the future?
Yeah,
Okay.
It's part of the plan. So, I don't know if it's called the future land use plan.
It's just
There is a
called the
future land
plan.
use plan in there.
Well, that actually gives us, you know,
Well, and that's what I thought, really, the only thing to review is, isn't it? I mean, the rest of it's just fluff. I mean, I've looked
Yeah.
at this thing, I mean, this could be for Oxford, Mississippi, or for Collierville, Tennessee, until you get to the last quarter of it.
Yeah, I think that the future land use map is an important part, and I think we need to look at the different classifications of land use. You know, one thing that I noticed about the plan that concerns me a little bit is the fact that, you know, in our current plan, you know, the one from 2007, you know, where we have like a future land use map shows a piece of property and says, you know, it's recommended that this be like medium density residential. Okay? Well, when you go to the narrative of the plan, the narrative tells you that properties that are designated medium density residential, the preferred zoning district is R10, R12, whatever. Okay? The proposed plan that we're getting ready to look at doesn't do that. You know, it doesn't give you a preferred zoning district as part of the description of, you know, the future land use of the city. So the question kind of becomes, if it shows different kinds of residential, say, how do you know which residential district is being recommended with? You know? So, you know, I do think it's really important that we look at the future land use plan. Yeah. And certainly what Robert said is true in terms of, you know, a lot of the plan is basically analysis of existing conditions and, you know, development of goals and objectives, you know, and stuff like that. You know, important to the process, yes, but at this point, you know, it's all background material. You know, the future land use plan is really important. So, well, like you said, Mr. Chairman, why don't we get together and set up some groups and
I'll communicate with all y'all in regards to that, just to save y'all from
And we can do lunches or whatever it may be, just.
whatever y'all decide. You can have a Bible study over and pray about this.
There you go.
Whatever you want to do.
There you go.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn unless there's any other business? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Thank y'all.
Nobody seconded it.
Do-
I think Jordan did.
You didn't hear Jordan?
Yeah, he did now. He did now.
I heard
Thank
you.
you, Mr. Roloff, for seconding that motion.
I heard you, Jordan.